Hi everyone, Arsalan Arif here with Endpoints News, and thanks for joining us today to explore biology's modern limbs for labs of the future. We have a great panel joining us today. Please welcome Dan Chapman, Director and Product Line Leader with Merck, Dinesh Agaram, Consultant Development with Zifo, and Lauren Perlman, a Solutions Excellent Consultant at Benchling. If you have any questions, be sure to hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We reserve some time at the end of this webinar to answer your questions. And now I'm going to pass it over to Lauren to get us started. Lauren?
Great. Thanks so much, Arsalan. Dan, Dinesh, it's a pleasure. Really excited about today's topic. And I'm going to cue us up some. It wouldn't be a modern presentation if I didn't have a slide or two. So we're going to start off with the concept of lab of the future. And I think, the hypothesis I think we can all agree on is lab of the future is transforming how biotech products are created and brought to market. And I'd like to talk about the stages of the voyage and sort of your current state impressions of what's going on. Break it down into 3 steps along the way, from foundational to transformational, ultimately landing at the goal. And rather than lead with what we think the goal is, I'd love to hear from the two of you where you see the goal. Where are we going? Where are we at? And so on. So let's start with, the definition. Dan, how would you define the lab of the future concept?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, you can probably, in my view, you can break it down into, I guess, a couple of areas. I mean, longer term and where traditionally we've kind of been is kind of really where that cutting edge technology. And for me, lab of the future, the goal is always kind of that completely seamless, frictionless experience for our scientists in the lab. It's contextually relevant. The scientist walks into the lab, they touch either a piece of equipment or a piece of software. It knows where they've been, it knows what they're doing, it knows what they're trying to achieve, and is really helps them through the experience and through that workflow. That's the big long-term thing for me in terms of we're all going to get to. And we can bake in terms of well, how does that play into kind of the technologies that we've got. In the last few years, we've looked at things like or we've seen things in labs looking at things like how does Google Glass appear into here? How does the Microsoft HoloLens appear into here? There's voice technology and things that people are looking at, and kind of that's a little bit further out. More close to home in terms of how we get there and stuff for me is really just thinking about how these things talk together, how the systems that we've got typically have been kind of quite separate, and focusing on how all of these systems kind of talk together. How can we smooth out those interfaces? Can we improve the way that they talk? Can we improve the information flow through those? And really kind of honing on those experiences. So long term, short term for me is kind of how I break it down.
Great. Dinesh, would you add anything to that?
Yes, I will. I think by and large, I agree with Dan. The way I see it is, we have to move to a state in the future where information gets processed into knowledge by the entity that's best placed to process it and derive the maximum value out of it. And what I mean by that is, so far you have the processing of information has happened a lot in the scientist's mind. So the processing of knowledge is very tacit. In the future, I think with better automation, with better data analytics engines, you are going to have that processing happen in outside of that of the mind of the scientist. And I think the perfect balance between this kind of external processing of information into knowledge or conversion into knowledge, and the internal conversion, the tacit conversion, the judgment of the scientist. And I think we are moving towards a state, or rather, I would say we have to redefine the problem of the lab of the future to one where we can achieve this particular state of a perfect balance.
That's really interesting. I think, Dan, you focus more on sort of maybe the production processes and making sure we're collecting data, and Dinesh, you're talking about consumption processes. And so I'm curious to focus a little more on the consumption side. Like, what do you see emerging right now? What are the current successes that we've got going on externalizing both data quality and data results, i.e. knowledge creation?
Is that a question to me or?
Yeah, who do you want to have a crack at that one?
Dan, go on, it's fine, yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of good stuff going on around in terms of, data quality and just kind of, we see things emergent, okay? And so, we're starting to see much more interest and coalescence in just kind of data quality activities. And, I'm looking at groups around, the non-competitive or pre-competitive groups that are out there. There's groups like Allotrope and Pistoia and people like that are really helping to drive standards and focus around things like data quality and help us to kind of come together with those. And I think there's lots of great work coming out of those areas, and various companies, large and small, are tied in with that. One other thing that I see coming out of there is they also support smaller companies or emergent companies that have innovative technologies in that space as well. And I think with Pistoia is one of those examples, okay, where there's an award every year for emergent companies and things in that sense. And there's a lot of great work going on in with these smaller companies where they have the ability to be more agile. They're using more modern tools. They're not burdened to some degree with a lot of technical debt behind them, and are able to kind of leverage that more effectively, right? In terms of Cloudnative, the data backing behind them, are able to start to use some of the more modern data science tools and things to drive some of those insights. I think there's a lot of great stuff out there that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak to a little more on sort of specific ground level quality initiatives? Like, what are you seeing in that space to sort of, there's this concept of the citizen data scientist. I'm curious what both big and small you've seen.
Yeah, I guess, well, and the danger there actually is just kind of, it's easy to surface challenges there as well, right? Especially because at the bigger end of the spectrum where I am in kind of large pharma, because we've got all the groundswell of that data, I think there's for me personally, and kind of the experiences that I see day to day are more around kind of those challenges of wrangling all of that data and kind of getting our arms around that data quality. I think the opportunity for us to do that is huge because we've got loads of it and we've been around a long time, and we can really turn that into a competitive advantage as part of that. And large pharma as a whole, the challenge is wrangling that because it's been around for a long time and quality standards have changed, and our understanding of that now is different to where they were maybe 10, 15 years ago. And there are significant challenges around that. There is a lot more emphasis from the scientific teams on just being able to, I think as Dinesh really eloquently put at the beginning, around deriving knowledge. It's not just about the observations and the data that we kind of write down and just, what does it mean? What does it mean in context? What does it mean to the overall picture? And the level of sponsorship and the level of awareness has really gone up in the last few years in terms of what I've seen, and the expectations from senior scientific leaders in the field around, yes, we need to be more aware of the data that we've got, the quality of our data and how we use it. So and that's happening all over, and I've seen citizen scientists or even kind of just thinking about the general data literacy and data science literacy of scientists as a whole. One, I think the expectation is there for folks that have been in industry a long time. I think the awareness of the scientists coming in these days is a lot higher than it used to be as well, because they've been exposed to different tools as they've studied as well. And the possibilities are different to how they were 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, I think there's a mixture. There are a lot of challenges around kind of getting and wrangling all of that data into one place to really derive the maximum value out of that as well. So
building on that, I'm curious, Dinesh, what are you seeing with your customers in terms of expectations on their staff regarding data quality and then knowledge generation. And as a bonus add-on to that, what trends are you seeing in that knowledge creation itself?
Yeah, so I think the whole field of data and data management and data quality, the talk about this particular field is increased a lot. And so I think one of the things that has really helped is that people are talking a lot more about data quality. And although not every scientist involved in data management initiatives is directly involved in improving data quality, the fact that they are collaborating a lot more with each other at the moment, with in terms of, say, developing a common data model or developing ontologies, that kind of, and then also, and in addition to just developing to developing these ontologies, they're also trying to select some use cases, and they're trying to actually try to integrate data and see what's happening, and as on a kind of sort of proof of concept or a pilot basis. So I think they are actually seeing more of these data quality issues as they do this modeling together, and that is kind of increasing the importance of data quality. And overall, I think the trend with our customers and the last few years with other customers that I've worked with is that data quality is become a matter of concern at the design stage of projects, rather than as a something as a fallout or something as an outcome that people look at and then realize, oh my God, this is not working for us because of a poor data quality issue, right? So I think designing databases, designing the flow of data into the coffers of the organization, designing the generation of data and its curation is taking a lot more, or is seeing a lot more importance at this point in time. And it's become part of the of the organization process of setting up new projects and programs and change. So I think that's the trend, I would think. Yeah.
It reminds me of a bit of a cliche. You can't engineer quality into data once you've collected it, right?
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, I definitely kind of sync with that in terms of, when we're looking at kind of vendor selection and things like that, interoperability and data quality as well as part of that is a massive part of kind of our criteria and things when we're, there are other things. Obviously, we want the functionality of part of that is of course paramount, but how things interoperate with other systems and how it plays as part of that ecosystem is a really significant part of the decision criteria we make.
I want to hold that thought on the software and ecosystem view and ask one more question about Lab of the Future, and then we'll move on to that. I'd love to hear from both of you. What are the recent wins that you've seen for Lab of the Future? Maybe 1 to 2 things that are really exciting. And then looking forward, maybe 3 to 5 years, what do you see as the next wave of opportunity? So I'll put to you, Dinesh, first.
I think there are a couple of things that I have seen personally. It's mostly because of the COVID situation, I think. One is the focus on applying machine learning and AI techniques to the supply chain. So sort of bringing in some kind of predictability into that. And, I know that, AI and ML are kind of buzzwords, and they are fads that everybody has jumped onto. But then COVID has given a kind of a focus.
I think Dinesh's audio has cut out.
We've lost Dinesh.
Yes. Well, Dan, let me put.
Yeah. I mean, kind of riffing in a similar vein. I mean, I was going to look at and one of the things I had in mind was especially the tumultuous last couple of years we've had in terms of healthcare and things like that. And yeah, there are a number of novel new initiatives and things that have come out. I mean, just in terms of the focus on clinical data as well as a whole, the number of people, not just kind of scientists, but people that are interested in kind of the output of clinical data and what the output of the clinical results and things that are coming out. I think that just speaks to how much more aware of the data behind the therapies that we take has gone up, and I think that's a really good thing. I think that's where folks are aware. in there. So I mean, I think that's a bright spot, because I think it just speaks to how much the world has moved along. It's also difficult not to be a little bit cynical there, and I guess I kind of put my product manager hat back on. And Lauren, you said, think about positives in that sense, but I guess the word of warning there for using things, yes, okay, we all want to use AI and ML and data science and what have you. For me, that's the kind of the means to the end, but for me, it's always going to come back to what problem are we solving. And we've got to make sure that when we're applying it, we're doing it with the right amount of rigor, and that we're doing it in a way that actually solves the problem that's in place. And that's the danger. And it's kind of, it's easy to get sucked into the new shiny technology, but we've got to come back and think, okay, so why are we doing it? What are we trying to achieve? So I guess there's a balancing point in there. So
totally agreed. And one thing that strikes me is no matter how advanced our technologies get, you got to stick to fundamentals and really understand what you're doing. I could talk for quite a long time about this topic. It's a deep...
Let's see if we've got Dinesh back.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, that's great. I think thanks for that. So sorry about this, sort of break. The other area I really think, and I'm quite interested in this because I was very closely involved with the COVID labs in the UK, and one of the things that we realized was that instrument integration is a great area and we made great progress, but then when it comes to troubleshooting, we are still lagging behind because we are still looking at lagging indicators when it comes to correcting instruments. And so in the COVID scenario, it was important to get the instrument up and running. So first of all, to figure out what's gone wrong. And, in real time, you need to go and correct that. And I think so the advent of leading indicators in the troubleshooting of, instrument integration is something that has happened in the COVID times. And I think that is something that has also been seeing some kind of growth in terms of application of technology, and that knowledge is being transferred across to the rest of the ecosystem and in the other kinds of labs that are not operating in real time in terms of having to produce results. Yeah.
So great segue. I'm going to bring up a slide and let's talk a little bit about the software that's supporting everything we're talking about. So, our hypothesis, and I speak for Benchling when I say this, that modern science requires a continuum approach to software tooling. What you're seeing here is sort of the classical legacy view, where you've got how I would sort of say a solution for every problem. And I know, Dan, as a product manager, you're probably having a little bit of a headache now when I say that. ELNs are very different than LIMS, but the reality is that what we're learning, and we've seen over the last decade, is that it's a continuous process. Things that you learn in R&D quickly move into development. You don't want to lose line of sight on the information you got during your R&D phase. And the lines kind of blur a bit anyway. And then there's early development and later development. And before you know it, you're really trying to do tech transfer into an MES. The challenge is if systems aren't built properly or integrated completely, it's really inefficient. You lose a lot of context, you lose traceability, you don't share processes and process management. And, Dan, you could probably, well, both of you can probably speak at length about the different product owners and maybe the cults of personality that come along with that. And so, there's a bit of an onerous IT management. And so as far as the future goes, you require a modern tech stack. Again, very Benchling oriented. We are highly focused on the biological sciences. The modern problems are really being addressed by biology. That means large molecule awareness and understanding and all of the special handling that goes along with that kind of data, RNA, antibody, drug conjugates, et cetera. We're becoming more and more distributed, both in terms of labs being separated over continents and people working remotely. So it's very important to provide a connection, a connectability across sites between people, being able to log in over, a cloud-based modality as opposed to having to be on premise. Science is changing so rapidly, so systems have to be highly adaptable, but still rigorous, right? Like we've talked a lot about data quality and the need for systems to be, accommodating in that regard. And then finally, it's 2022. We're all used to pulling an iPhone out of a box, turning it on, and off to the races. And so users want something that works really well. That's actually, what I like to say is we want to delight our users. And I'm sure that's true for you as a product manager and a consultant. Very important to be able to do that. So queuing that up, I would love to hear from the two of you. What is it that you're looking for the most, Dan for Merck and Dinesh for your clients? We'll start with Dinesh.
I think looking at our current profile of clients, I would say I probably roughly divide them into two. One category that or a segment that is still getting themselves into a fairly good state of data maturity, talk about fair implementation and so on and so forth. The other half that have made great advancements in this particular area and are shifting their focus back to automation from data and intelligence. So I think the the whole journey of digital transformation started off with an equal importance given to data and automation, and then the shift moved to data initially, because that's where we found that we are not able to deal with things really well. And then now the shift, in that particular category of customers is going back into the automation side of things. I think that's where, we are developing solutions for hyper automation, for example, and have been fairly successful in being able to, get that onboarded onto our customers' infrastructure. And on the other side, we are still implementing some fundamental transformations on the data side. So I quite like the mix at the moment that we have between intelligence and automation, and then, so basically that's my answer.
How important is it for you to have sort of one size fits all, or maybe like a few sizes fit all type technology, or is it more microservice oriented, or a blend of both?
Yeah, I think you should. The word adaptable on your previous slide, it is. We have to interpret that adaptable word really well. So if you're thinking of having or offering a variety of options, on in your infrastructure, then you'll have to think of that as capabilities that you build and give access to your end users. But then over that particular layer of capability, set of capabilities, you're also, you would want to give a layer of decision support. And this decision support can happen through a combination of three things. One, of course, personal choice or individual choice and selection. The second, it has to happen through, some level of intelligence. You can extend that to ML and so on. But then I think even basic intelligence in terms of being able to choose the right tools for the right tasks is a level of intelligence. And the third thing is, I think, the ability to discover new, tools out of the underlying set of capabilities. So a tool that you have not necessarily used until now, but somehow that particular middle layer in there is able to discover that tool as the right tool to use for your particular innovation exploration. So I think, and we have to look at adaptability at different levels of interfacing between the grid of capability and the collaboration layer, which is actually, figuring out how to choose which tool will be the best. And then there is this, the next level of interfacing, which is the individual to that particular collaborative infrastructure, where the individual is engaging with the infrastructure and making the right choices to solve the problems. So I think that's going to give us the adaptability that we are talking about.
Mm-hmm. Dan, turning to you, what are you seeing in your role at Merck, and what's the current philosophy on software tooling and ecosystem?
Yeah, and they're kind of anchoring the same point around some of that adaptability component there as well that Dinesh rightly pointed out. I mean, we need to strike the balance, right, in terms of you know, we need to have the right level of tooling for our scientists to work with that fit their needs. And so, you know, there are, not every scientist is the same. They have different needs. They're going to need slightly different tools. The flip side of that is not every scientist gets their own tools. So there's a balance there between, yeah, let's get everything versus, you know, one size doesn't fit all. And I think, you know, kind of Lauren, you said at the front, right, in terms of, yeah, the solution that fits them all, or whatever term I think you used, right? I think, yeah, as a product manager, I've got thoughts there. So, you know, we've got to strike that balance, and, you know, the fewer systems you have, the easier they are to integrate, the easier they are to manage that data flow and kind of keep the, you know, that control in that sense. The better the tool fits the scientist workflow, the better data quality you're probably going to get out of it, because they're, you know, it's more fitting to their workflow. They are more likely to be able to kind of comply and what have you. And that you're not asking them to stretch too much with a given tool to meet the overall needs of the organization. So yeah, there's a balance there. I mean, that said, you know, I think, you know, the day of the monolith is gone. You know, in terms of, you know, we've got to be looking at a best of breed type pattern for the various tools, and then subsequently integrate those in that sense, which kind of goes back to kind of the commentary on interoperability that, you know, we put a pin in earlier for there. The sad thing, and, you know, I'll put my pessimist hat on for, you know, maybe 20 seconds or so, is that, you know, within that kind of period, you know, the last 10, 15 years, the rate of change in the area, particularly, I mean, you called out, you know, the tooling, the particular kind of areas of tooling there, there's not been a lot of innovation in there, right, in terms of there. And it's, I want to see some, you know, some real kind of movement forward in here, and looking at kind of LIMS and ELN and things in there. There's an awful lot of the same that's happened in there, and a lot of those patterns, and there's a lot of opportunity to kind of make better use of things out there. So, you know, where there are bright spots and tooling and things, and, you know, we're going to take a lot of interest in them, because, you know, it's good to see. So where there are bright spots, yeah, you know, we're interested. But, you know, it's, how does it fit the workflow? How configurable is it in that sense? Can it all play together with everything else? And does it help our scientists really kind of in their workflow? Because that's when we get good data quality out of it, because you get good quality by design. You know, it could be technical controls. It could just be in terms of, you know, if a piece of software is actually pleasant to use, and the interface isn't, you know, horrendously confusing, that, you know what, you kind of get good results out at the end of it, because people want to use it. Stuff like that's important.
I'm curious, latching on to what you just said, kind of a two-parter. What is it that you're looking for in ELN and LIMS these days? And, you know, as far as that next evolution, and then what are the bright spots, sort of speaking?
Yeah, you know, there are things out there that are now, you know, not, or that are, you know, utilizing kind of modern cloud architecture, for example, where, you know, the ability to scale compute, for example, in you know, in areas where we need it, being able to turn that on and off, that's huge, right? That technology has been around for a while. We should be able to utilize it better than we do. The ability to deploy the software, again, that's another area where, yeah, if you have to kind of get servers in and what have you, and there's a lot of restrictions around that takes time. We shouldn't, in the time that we're in, we should be able to kind of turn this stuff on. Yes, we have to meet certain regulatory or SDLC requirements and things, but it can still be, you know, I think there's room for us to kind of utilize those a bit more. So, I mean, they're some of the things we look for. Frankly, I know you touched on it in terms of scientists' expectations, in terms of coming in, you know, there are some tools out there that still look like they've been put together in the 1990s. You know, if you put something modern in front of them that, you know, looks kind of, we're not going to have something that's going to look like something maybe you find on here. Maybe you are, right? But, you know, to a large degree, in terms of, refresh and something that's clean and easy to use and has a sense of workflow with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's compelling for our scientists to come in and get hold of. So, I mean, I think there is a lot of opportunity. There are newer vendors and things emerging that that leverage some of this, and when we make decisions accordingly in that sense.
Your last bit there makes me think of a term. I hadn't heard it before, but like data ergonomics, right? Like
yeah,
that actually meets the user where they are to facilitate their workflow most effectively.
Yeah, and and it speaks to can we walk them through a process more effectively? We don't have to surface all of that in one place on one screen and have everything in kind of 6-point text that they've got to kind of navigate through, right? Can we walk them through that? Can we actually stitch some of those workflows together, and in some cases between softwares in that sense, and have them walk through a workflow? Can we make some decisions along the way, because now we've got good quality of control of the data, and help them through that process? These are things that kind of start to become more they're more available now, and previously if you wanted to get something like that, then maybe you'd have to center in, well, it all has to stay in one system because that's the only way you can do it. But hey, that system only really is a good fit for a small population of your scientists, and everybody else who just has to kind of suck it up and deal with it. That's a really tough spot to be in, and so we don't want to be there anymore.
Gotcha. Dinesh, your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with Dan. I think I really like the pragmatic approach to answering that question as well. So I think one thing with the LIMS and ELN software is that we are still talking about LIMS and software, LIMS and ELN, and we don't seem to have got out of that mode of trying to figure out how to have the best LIMS implementation and the best ELN implementation, and how to get maximum value out of that. And that's a little bit of a shame, I would think, because ELN and LIMS have been around for a very long time now, I think, and people are also getting frustrated with having to deal with it over and over again. And the real problem, I think, or the opportunity for getting out of that mode and looking at bigger things and making this whole adaptable infrastructure a reality, is a question of dealing with translation and nuance. I think if you look at standard operating procedures or protocols for the moment, there is no easy translation between them and machine language, right? And I think if you do not have that kind of a translation possible, it always require a lot of interpretation by human beings, and then converting that into the templates and so on and so forth for LIMS and ELN that you want to implement. So that's one of the. Second thing is the point that Dan mentioned. Every scientist has his or her own requirement, or every department has his or her own its own requirement as regards a particular implementation, a particular feature, a particular dialog box, whatever it is. And I think unless you are able to, as part of this translation capability, provide that nuance, or a nuanced handling of that translation, you simply cannot get out of this mode of talking about LIMS and ELN. We need to shorten the time frames we take to actually implement and make enhancements to ELNs and LIMS implementation. And if that happens, then people can start looking at other things over and above. Right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something we think a lot about at Benchling. The workflow piece is a core release we have currently out. Both linear and branch workflow is a big part of what we're doing now. It's interesting. I'm kind of hearing two different flavors, though. There's how the software works itself, but there's, Dinesh, you're pointing to the actual process of implementation as being either a win or a loss. Are you seeing any particularly, what's worked really well in that regard? Is there an expectation of timeline, of interactivity? Like what are users thinking about these days on that front?
I think you're probably going to be disappointed with my answer, because I probably am not going to talk about the technical side of things. I think a good success, I would think, is the ability of the scientists to come together and make technical decisions, or decisions on choosing technology, and being able to guide the process of choosing the right features and so on. This has really improved a lot, I think, across the customers. I think we know how to do it now really well, working with a lot of people, a variety of players, variety of scientists, and a variety of departments, especially in the large pharmas that we work with. So that's a good success, and it's not about technology. Really speaking, it is about people learning to work with each other really, really well. And the other thing is, I think a lot of considerations in this process are becoming design time considerations. Like, for example, we discussed data quality. Process design is, there is an enormous effort that goes into process design, getting it right. 10, 15 years back, I think, we did do process modeling, but people didn't really necessarily put in that much effort into process modeling. They spent a lot more effort on technical implementations and then testing and so on, which is good. But I think it's important to get the first things right first. And I think that shift is also really, really good, I would say. Those are the two things I can think of. Yeah.
As a follow-on to that, I'm curious, one thing I've seen a lot in the industry is processes are constantly evolving. And so one of the challenges in process modeling is it's a moving target. What are you seeing, Dan, from like sort of an SDLC type perspective that's addressing that challenge effectively?
Well, there's a spiky question.
I didn't say they were easy.
I mean, SDLC as a whole is a moving target as well to some degree. I think there's much more acceptance of taking more of a risk-based approach these days. If I look at the latest guidance coming from kind of GAMP and various things around there, there's a lot of good guidance to pick up on there. Your mileage is still going to vary depending on where you sit and what people's risk profile is, and so in some areas that maybe I'll go back and kind of put my vendor hat back on before, I guess, when I was there, you'll see a different spectrum, right? Some people are going to say, hey, you know what, I don't want to test anything, and I'm going to trust lots and leverage the vendor testing and what have you. And other folks are going to be, so yes, I know the vendor's done a lot of stuff, but I still want to test every button. And people are going to exist somewhere on that spectrum, and that's a continuing conversation. Does having something, the newer technology where you can think about configuration as configuration as code, do I think that helps? Yeah, I do, right? Because I think that gives you more control. When I spin up a new environment, I know exactly what it's going to look like because it's written down in the scripting. So yeah, that helps a lot. Do kind of software vendors and things being able to provide the testing and be more open in terms of leveraging that vendor testing, is that going to help that conversation? Yeah, it really is. Okay, because I think having that either as a professional service package or a standing package for folks to get around and say, yes, here is the work that's already been done. I can now make a risk-based approach in terms of what we do and don't test and how that affects me in there. Yes. I guess the flip side of that, then the challenge is there, if you're then working in, say, a multi-tenant environment and being able to stay current and keep up with that and have that environment to some degree changes whether you want to or not, and then thinking about how your processes have to change in order to keep up. And are things held behind some kind of configuration flag so that we can absorb things when we want to versus just because we have to. I think there's, you kind of giveth and taketh in equal measure, and I haven't seen everybody kind of fully work it all out yet, so it's a moving target.
Absolutely. Well, you queued me up perfectly. I don't know if it was on purpose, but I wanted to shift as the last little bit here and talk about getting these solutions into the hands of users and really setting it up. So change management, which is something I'm sure is near and dear to all of our hearts. So one slide just to cue it up. We do a lot of this. You both spoke a bit about the implementation. And one passion here at Benchling is we have an incredible customer experience organization, very, very strong professional services team that focuses intensely on this. And it's all about getting people down the right path and establishing that sort of drumbeat on release, on updates, on getting users into the system. And we found that there's sort of 4 really key attributes to a solid change management program. And I'd love to talk about these with you and hear what you think. Dinesh, you spoke earlier about ontology and data governance, obviously really key that you have sort of a top-down and bottom-up view of this, that it's understood as a partnership across the organization, what we are trying to accomplish in that regard. I think we all talked a bit about delighting our users. We want to make it really easy to use a platform. And Dan, you talked a lot about solutions that speak directly to use and need. And so that's really a focal point in change management, making sure it addresses the user directly. Obviously, communication is so key, and there's 2 steps with that, or 2 portions to that rather. Keeping really tight lines of communication with internal teams so everybody knows what's happening, why it's happening, and then really highlighting how it's helping, what's working, and reproducing those patterns, right? Like I believe all the information that we need is always out there. It's just a question of finding it and utilizing it effectively. So with that, would love to hear, Dinesh, with your clientele, what's working really well in the change management? You talked a lot about implementation timelines as sort of maybe a sticking point. So how are you seeing the field address it at large, and what are some bright spots that really land well?
Yeah, I think the clue is to your introduction to this topic. I think is in that introduction. I think first thing you said was around engaging with customer, or rather the end users, and taking their views, and performing change impact assessments and so on. Those are good ways to start studying the reality of the situation, or the potential reality of making that change, right? What the impact of that is going to be on the end users. There is definitely an acceptance of the fact that change management is important. And this is also aided by the fact that everyone wants to call these larger changes now as digital transformation. The word transformation means change, loosely. So I think people are willing to accept the idea of a project as a change project rather than as a project, which means the engagement required and the design of that engagement and the communication strategy for that change is something that they think about upfront and in a very detailed fashion. It's formalized, which means that it will get executed. People are talking a lot about change champions and appointing people as change champions, and there is definitely a move towards a more discerning way of choosing who would be change champions in different departments. All of that is happening across the board, and those are really, really bright spots, I think, and really, really good things that are happening in the world, in our customer world. So that's definitely one thing I would say. Other than that, I think even with technical change management, right, there is a lot more documentation of what a change will look like, right? We are, for example, we are designing playbooks on how to implement change, technical change. If you want to do some enhancements to an existing deployment of LIMS or ELN, how do you go about doing that? And we are talking about it. We're clearly articulating what should be the right process for that. What are the drivers for change? How do you validate a need? How do you ensure that you involve, at least in a representational fashion, people from every department that is affected, all the key stakeholder groups, so on and so forth. And we are kind of documenting a lot of this in the form of playbooks and using that. And our customers are asking us for those sorts of things, that kind of articulation. And reading them up and actually allowing us to make them part of our roadmaps and our plans for change. These are really, really good improvements. The question around implementation timelines, if you were to implement proper change management, in overall the implementation timeline actually expands. It becomes longer. At the same time, the upside of that is that there is less rework. So for a particular implementation to become stable and get into some kind of a positive equilibrium, the time it takes is much less. Earlier, if it would take 3 years, now it would probably take 1.5 years or 2 years. And those 2 years will be consumed by the end-to-end change project. It's probably one round or one iteration over that of kind of smoothening the edges, so to speak. So I think that's a good change.
Great. Dan, anything to add?
I mean, all of that. I mean, lifting off of some of kind of the earlier things that I think you touched on to kind of set us up with, right? I think we've got to focus on the stuff that we can control. And so, you've got to look at, what are the appropriate technical controls that we can put in place? How can we drive good practice to some degree at source? So ontologies, for example, and vocabularies play a really great role in there in terms of kind of how do we get to where we want to get to. Software providers like yourself, again, what technical controls have we got available in order to kind of lock that process down to some degree, or as best we can, so that we get kind of the best result out the other end. But then the other part of that is, we can do all of that. We can be solving the perfect problem with either the most amazing code or the most amazing configuration and all of that stuff. If we don't deal with kind of the overall kind of experience and that learning curve of people coming on board and understanding why we're making the change and kind of helping people through all of that, we can do all the best work in the world. And if we fail at that last kind of point, then it's all in vain. It will still fall flat, and that's frustrating all around. I think it's frustrating for the folks that were that are involved. It's frustrating for the folks that are sponsoring it. Everybody wants it to be a success. So I think that Dinesh, I mean, you spoke about kind of that investment in the change, right, and kind of the putting the work in. And there's a kind of, yes, okay, we're tracking along at normal here. Okay, now we're going to start some change, and maybe things slow down a little bit. Well, if that's really shallow, we're only going to get so far. If we can do that really deeply and kind of get people on board, the trajectory coming out of that is a lot higher, and we get to a better point. So being able to leverage engaging people early and often, picking out champions, picking out folks that are kind of really get on board, that can make a good case. I can tell somebody about something. Hey, we're going to do this next year with this software. Okay, yeah, but you're just a guy from IT. What do you care, right? We need to kind of build, advocates as part of that process, and get the context and what have you, and can help us build in that sense. So I think you'd said, okay, working with kind of internal teams and what have you, that's not just IT, that's the scientists, that's the quality people, that's whoever else we need to kind of get involved in all of that, to get that surround sound, and then and stay on it and make sure that we're tracking progress and have some really good metrics to track, and make sure that we deliver what we said we would, because that generates kind of goodwill and willing to go around the loop again.
Mm-hmm. It's I mean, what strikes me about both of your answers is it's really a move away from them and us in terms of digital transformation, and it's a we problem. We are working together.
Absolutely.
To execute. I want to remind the audience that we have a Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to summarize here in a moment, and then we're going to move to our Q&A. I think some of the key takeaways for me today on Lab of the Future is it's all about automating the process, the data collection, the data transfer. And I think a really key aspect is data aggregation. So pulling all of the data together in a meaningful way. And you need software that supports that. And it's really about software that plays well in a broader ecosystem, software that provides that interoperability and the connectivity, but then balances all of that with a pointed user experience. We need to solve specific problems for specific people. obviously ideal if we can solve more problems for more people, but not necessarily gonna, one ring to rule them all, to steal from Lord of the Rings. There will be a few solutions to do all of that. And then finally, super critical to work with your users, build a partnership to get that digital transformation out there. It should be something we're plotting together, agreeing to together, understanding how we measure our successes and report those out to the broader community so people can see that we're making good on all of our promises. Well, with that, thank you, Dinesh, Dan. Really, really awesome conversation. Always appreciate talking with you guys. And I'll hand it over to Arsalan.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you to the panel for the discussion. I've got a couple of questions here from the audience and a few of my own, and we just have a few short minutes left here. First, I just want to quickly go to Dan. And so Dan, at Merck, I understand that you've really helped drive the company modernize its systems and processes. Tell me about the challenges that you were seeking to address and what were teams struggling with, and can you just wrap up what advice you might give others going on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, we are working to modernize, right? In terms of, I'm sure, we're not in a unique situation. Okay, we have a mix of systems that some of which are newer than others, some of which have, various checkered histories in that sense. So, we constantly are going to deal with, the whole life cycle of all of the various products that we've got, and unsurprisingly, taking the view as a product manager around that. So, how do we deal with it? Ultimately, it comes back to fitness for purpose, and I think Lauren used the term kind of pragmatic earlier, right? And I think that's where we are. And some things we can't touch everything all the time at once. So, trying to work out, understand from our scientific teams and also kind of the technology challenges that we've got. How do we what's the most important thing to us to drive, and in terms of where are our scientists hurting most at the moment? Where do we see the organization going in terms of what their capabilities are needed, not just today but next year and maybe a couple of years ahead of that? Not getting too far ahead of ourselves, because I think we've seen in the last couple of years that things can change on a dime. So part of that is also being set up to be able to change rapidly, and not be, hey, we're all planned out quarter by quarter, 3 years into the future. Yeah, that might not work out so well in that sense. So trying to set us up for change. The overall single piece of advice, I think, is just be really, really clear on what problem you're solving, and drive to solve that. That's a very product management answer, though, I'll give you there.
That's fine. That's fine. I want to ask you a question here from the audience, and this is actually, we've gotten this question in several different, couple different questions about it, but I'm going to try to put it into one over here. Question to Dan. Do you see the workflow being within the application, or is it the application becomes cloud native? Then are you composing workflows from a cloud native infrastructure? Is that where the emphasis should be? And another, someone else has sort of asked it in a different way over here, saying is, how are you handling the rise of cloud technologies and the remote control for scientists who are remote?
Sure. I guess to answer the first question, the first part of that question, the answer is yes. We need to think about the workflow within an application for sure. There's also kind of the macro component of that about where it fits into the rest of the flow. And so, particularly in the work that I'm doing today, my product team and the applications that they manage as a whole, everything is intertwined, okay? And our scientists, in order to get a job done, or they touch multiple systems, and every time they move between those systems, they are carrying little pieces of transactional data and IDs in their head, or things that they have to transcribe between systems. They don't exist in one single world as part of that. So we need to smooth that interface out, and that's internally within a system to make sure that data flows, and then across system as part of that. And then I guess the remote part of that question in terms of their, I think it plays in. I mean, I guess it is slightly different in terms of you still want to make sure that data flows. The better that flows, and realistically, our scientists don't all sit across each other in the same lab anymore. Certainly, when you get to a level of scale, maybe in some of the smaller biotechs and things, they're all on one site. We don't live in that world. Okay, we've got our scientists are spread all over the globe, and work and collaborate effectively. And not just our scientists, we work with external partners where we share work and data as part of that. We have to make that data portable. We have to think about what data we do move and what we don't move as part of that, what we can and can't. So data portability. That cloud makes life easier. Yeah, it does, because I think there's opportunities then to share that more effectively. You also need to think about your data governance at that point as a result, kind of going back to some of the, I guess, the earlier commentary around multi-tenancy and making sure that you've got the right level of segregation and user privileges and various other things as part of that. All of that is still true. So I don't know. Does that answer the question that you asked me?
Absolutely. And we have so many more questions coming in. We just have so few short minutes. So I'm going to try to get one quick question in. I'm going to try to get Dinesh's quick response and Dan, your quick response to this. How do you ensure data coming in from different systems is clean and correct, especially in scenarios involving big enterprises, vendors, and partners?
Did you say cleaning correct?
Clean and correct. Yeah. Very quick
Clean
answer.
and correct. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. I think by making data quality a concern in the way you write your objectives, outputs or desired outputs and outcomes of any initiative that aims to acquire new data sources, I think that's the first thing. So you need to make it a formal and an important aspect of any data acquisition program. So I think that's the first thing, right? The second thing is, I think,
communication. Okay, quick answer, Dan. Do you have a quick response to that?
That's a tough one to answer quickly, I guess. But I mean, it's I think a lot of it is done before you collect the data, right? A lot of that, to make it clean and in that sense, a lot of that work is done in the setup, so that when you receive it, you know what you're going to get as part of that. I think that's the quickest answer. There's
Everyone's got to know what they're getting into and be clear about that stuff coming in even before it comes in. So that's the answer from both of you, and that seems very reasonable. I want to thank everyone in the audience for tuning in. And before we wrap up today, you're going to see a poll up on the screen. If you'd like to learn more about today's discussion, please be sure to vote. And I want to thank Benchling again for sponsoring the discussion. I want to thank the entire panel for all of their expertise today. I learned a lot. And if you would like to rewatch the webinar or to share it with your colleagues, a link for on-demand viewing will be sent tomorrow. I'm just going to leave up this poll here for another second. Over here, thank you to the audience for coming and participating. Over here, such a high participation rate today. Again, I want to thank Dan Chapman. He's the Director of Product Line Leader at Merck, Dinesh Agaram, the Principal Consultant, Zifo, and Lauren Perlman, Principal Solution Excellence Consultant at Benchling. And again, thank you to Benchling for sponsoring this discussion at Endpoints webinar. Again, I'm Arslan Ar for Endpoints News. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Thanks, everybody.